Morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Chris Hayward, the Policy Chairman and Political Leader of the City of London Corporation. And I'm delighted to welcome you all to what is an important day in the City Corporation's calendar. Today, we launch our annual Global Offer to Business report, also known as our Global Benchmarking report. Before I begin, can I just give you a polite reminder that today's event is being recorded and may be shared on our digital platforms in the future. There will be plenty of time for questions with our outstanding panel of experts, so please do post any questions that you want to ask in the Q&A box. And if you have any technical difficulties, please ask a question and our technical team will try to resolve it for you wherever possible. Now, the fourth edition of our Global Offer to Business report is an opportunity to compare the leading global financial centres, see where they excel, and indeed where they can be better. It's an opportunity to see how global financial centres are performing over time, where and how they change their focus and their offer. And crucially, it's an opportunity for us here in London to hold ourselves accountable and improve. You could call it an annual MOT, if you will, of how we are performing. And this independent review of international competitiveness uses 101 metrics, which you will see embedded throughout the report. And we believe that this data can give you, businesses and policymakers, greater information to shape your decision making. I know from my own personal experience as someone who built their own businesses from the ground up, that high quality data gives confidence to those decisions that really matter. For firms with global reach looking to invest, for the financial and professional services sector looking to best practice, for countries and companies looking at how to improve, this report gives answers. Now, since our first report, there has been a great deal of change, a pandemic, Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine and resulting energy shock, a cost of living crisis, and more geopolitical events. And the range of factors has made for challenging economic conditions. A challenge has been felt globally. London does not stand alone. New York, Singapore, Frankfurt, Paris, Hong Kong, and Tokyo are all facing the same economic pressures. And our benchmarking report shows that over the past year, that it is London that has best adapted to the challenge. And indeed, we are back at the top globally. Crucially, London made great strides improving its regulatory and legal environment. The groundbreaking Financial Services and Markets Act legislation, which the City of London Corporation supported, together with the Edinburgh reforms, unblocked bottlenecks and allowed financial activity to flow. And this is proof that good things happen when the public and private sectors work together in partnership. But despite this welcome news, London cannot afford to stand still. We must press forward with further reforms. The City of London Corporation's vision for economic growth recommends policy designed to strengthen the entire United Kingdom's international competitiveness to 2030 and indeed beyond. It is the result of convening over 300 financial and professional services partners, many here today, so thank you. And crucially, it has cross-party political support. Working together, we can ensure that London remains the world's preeminent financial centre for many years to come. It's now my pleasure to hand over to our next speaker this morning, indeed the author of our benchmarking report, Alistair Wainwright, to talk through the report's findings in further detail. So Alistair, over to you.
Thank you, Chris. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'm just going to talk through the sort of main headlines before we move on to our panel. As Chris just said, very happy that we retained our top position in the global benchmarking report. As you can see from the bars on the left-hand side, all of the financial centres that we study lost points in this year's report, but London only lost 1 point, whereas the other financial centres declined further. What drove those results? Well, London's score fell by 1 point, as the decline in capital market activity was offset by improvements in regulatory environment and the access to talent and skills dimensions. London now ranks top in talent and skills and second across all the other dimensions, and that consistency then leads to an overall #1 rank. New York's score declined as the capital markets activity and investment activity declined. That large increase in 2021 during COVID then declined in 2022, and our system scores the direction of travel as well as the absolute size. So these are some of the new metrics that we added in 2024. We looked at office vacancy rates. As you see, the chart shows that London has reasonably low office vacancy rates compared to some of the other financial centres. That changes across the city. So the West End has a lower vacancy rate than the City, which has a lower vacancy rate than Canary Wharf. Business complexity, which shows the difficulty of international firms setting up in the market. The UK is ranked as one of the least complex business markets to open a new business. Our gender gap, which is a broad measure for equality. Visa accessibility. So we know that visa costs for the UK are high, but getting a visa is a lot simpler than in some of the other financial centres, which allows movement of people from in your organisations. And pension quality. So pensions are, of course, a financial benefit to workers, and they improve quality of life overall. So the UK actually has one of the best pension systems in the world. So looking at financial activity particularly, so you can see the grey bar, New York is where that decline was observed this year. Obviously, equity markets in the US have recovered in 2023, so that may be reflected in the future. You can see London and New York are way ahead of the other financial centres. Trading volumes and market cap fell across all asset classes, with the exception of foreign exchange in 2022. We saw a decline in fund AUM and others, but London leads in services, export, international bond trading, and issuance, cross-border banking, FX, and derivatives trading. Onto the regulatory environment. As Chris just mentioned, the introduction of Financial Services Markets Act and the Edinburgh reforms improved London's score. We can see a decline there in Singapore's score in this year's analysis. The UK's regulatory environment is highly regarded across around the world and is ranked as one of the least complex business environments. And we score well in metrics related to openness, movement of people and capital, but we do lose out due to high taxes. And talents and skills, as I mentioned, this is our top where we rank top this year. We cover 22 metrics across skills and hiring, international talent, quality of life. We score well on quality, diversity. We have a lot of international talent in London, and we have an excellent higher education system. Improvement is required, though, in employee training particularly, and we have a decline in financial services relevant graduates. Visa costs, as I mentioned, are high, but the attractiveness to international talent is improving. So with that, I will hand over to Damien, who will introduce our panel. And thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much indeed, Alistair. That's a fantastic introduction. And thanks also very much to our policy chairman, Chris, for his introductory comments. So we're delighted that you're able to join us for the launch of which is our 4th annual benchmarking report, or to give its full title, our Global Offer to Business, London and the UK's Competitive Strengths Supporting Economic Growth. There's a fantastic panel who are going to lay out for us some of the insights that the report has brought out. And I'll just take you through them. There is Claire Tunley, CEO of the Financial Services Skills Commission, which launched in 2020 in partnership with the City Corporation and the City UK. We have Neylin Mutlu, Global Business Manager for Corporate Advisory and Sustainable Solutions at JP Morgan. And we have Danny Lopez, the CEO of Glasswall. Both Neylin and Danny are part of the Vision for Economic Growth Steering Board, and many thanks for their contributions there. Now, as we heard from Chris and Alistair, London remains the top global financial centre in the world. And although all the financial centres in the analysis saw a decline in financial market activity, London improved its scores in 2 key areas, regulatory environment and talent and skills. And so we've got a real chance to dig into some of those as we turn to the panel in a moment. So Claire, perhaps I can come to you first. I wonder if we can dig straight into talent and skills. So the report shows that London now ranks top in terms of talent and skills. It's clearly an area where the UK financial services industry has improved, and indeed the FSSE can take credit for some of that improvement. Can you tell us how the financial professional service industry has succeeded in attracting and retaining talent?
Thanks, Damien. And yeah, no, thanks for giving us the credit of switching the indicator. I think we can take some of it, but not all. We work with 42 firms in financial services in membership, and a lot of the issues and insights we're working with apply to professional services as well. So they are read across there. I think in the last few years we've seen a real focus on the importance of skills and talent and the people in the industry to weather the shocks and the uncertainty that we see, but also to provide and drive that innovation and competitiveness. And I think when we look at it from a commission with our members, we look 2 sides to this, and the maturity of the conversation over the last few years sort of gives an insight into how firms are taking this really seriously. So we very much look at the skills that people need to have, the knowledge they need to have to be able to do their job, to add value, to really differentiate what they're doing, but also who, the people, the demographic angle here, and who are doing those jobs. Why do they want to come here? What do they want to have as their remuneration, their package? And that's always changing. These things are always moving. When we look at the skills that people need to have, tech skills, not a new area, very much still need data analysts, software developers, cyber security professionals. AI, automation is much more higher up the list than it was. It's not brand new, it's always there. But one of the key things that we find is the behaviours that underpin those skills. So relationship management, teamwork, empathy. It's not just what you know, it's how you apply it, how you can spot those opportunities. And so we see firms really thinking through, what does this look like for our business? And that comes quite a nice offer to people, that they can see there's a much broader piece that they can plug into. And it does link to workplace culture as well. And I have to say, being able to develop yourself and progress does become an attractive point for employees, a differentiator if they can see as progression. But we can also see real shifts in the last few years around things like green skills. The number of new jobs in the industry that are specifically green jobs in financial services is actually quite low, but the transformation and sort of shift and pivot for existing roles to understand and work with the issues around greening, green transition, etc., green finance is huge, and that's a huge attraction point for the sector. And what we've seen is huge investment from firms in upskilling, reskilling, and equipping their employees with that knowledge and capability to support the pivot towards green finance. So there are efforts going on, and I think also when I talked about the WHO, the efforts around broader inclusion, diversity, ranking really highly on board diversity, for example, is a real positive. There have been strong efforts there, still more to do. But it's firms are thinking very much more about that package. What do people want? They want to, London's a great city to live in. That's a real differentiator. But it's not all about remuneration. It is about the purpose of the business, etc. And the green transition does feed into a lot of that. As Alistair said, employer training, there's still more to do. Pipeline of skilled labour, there's very much lots of work to do to get the right skills into businesses through education and beyond, and things like visa costs. But we do see there's a real collective effort around domestic and international efforts on skills, and it shows in the data, so it's good.
Claire, thank you very much for opening us up on that. And it's fascinating what you say about the depth of skills, but also the need for breadth as well, to be able to actually sew together many of the different areas people are working on, including, of course, and you've raised already, sustainable finance skills, and that actually is something that is threaded through many roles, as well as being a key component of some. So Neylin, if we can turn to the area of sustainable finance, our analysis shows the UK has a strong appetite for sustainable finance, with UK companies committed to ESG policies and net zero, right through to investors allocating to green investment funds. I wonder if you could set out for us what the benefits are for the UK economy through broadening sustainable finance, and why you think it's happening now.
Thank you, Damian, for having me today. And listen, we actually have outlined in quite a lot of depth the benefits of sustainable finance in the report that was published in September, Vision for Economic Growth. But just to kind of hone in a couple of key points to answer your question, sustainable finance is a major long-term opportunity for the United Kingdom. And I really want to underline the word long-term. Sustainability transition is here to stay. Growing our green businesses is here to stay. And all of this has potential to scale business and jobs in strategically important sectors across the whole country. And why now? Sustainable finance can contribute significantly to growing the UK economy across all regions, while also helping to deliver better outcomes for the environment and society. Balanced actions will be needed to create the conditions to scale and accelerate finance for the transition, and to better enable financial institutions like us to facilitate capital and provide expertise to help companies realize their transition and sustainability objectives. And given the topic of today's panel is really about UK's competitiveness and how we can maintain and grow it, for this country to maintain and increase its competitiveness as the transition progresses, it will be important to hone in on where more investment is needed. What are the specific projects and businesses that need that support, and how the country, the United Kingdom, can use its global position to create the enabling conditions both domestically and internationally to ensure the building blocks are in place for those projects to happen. The United Kingdom has the ambition, and as Claire just mentioned, the talent and skills, and also the enabling business environment to be a leading financial center for scaling innovation that accelerates the energy transition and contributes to sustainable and inclusive growth in the country.
Great, thank you very much. I think it's that practicality, the way that we actually have to translate some of the high ambitions into deploying capital in order to see businesses grow and net zero being achieved, that you bring out there. Another really key area for future growth, and indeed it's actually the fastest growing employment sector in the certainly within the square mile, is tech. So Danny, the benchmarking report shows, on the one side, UK tech, it's the top ecosystem in Europe, fantastic. but it still has some way to go to catch up the US, and we're seeing lots of progress elsewhere in the world and across Europe too. So what do we need to do here to take tech and innovation to the next level?
Thanks, Damien, and congratulations to Alistair, to you, to Chris, and to the team for this report, which is extremely important. So, look, I think on tech, we have much to be proud of. Clearly, we have a really solid story across fintech, and if you look at each of the verticals within fintech, whether it's payments and lending and asset management and digital banking, and the list goes on. We have become in many ways global leaders. We all marvel at the statistics around the amount of funding that is raised within fintech, and how over the last 12 months that amount was greater than the next 13 cities in Europe put together. So there's so much there to be proud of. But I think also in tech, we're reminded of all those tech giants who were leaders, and all of a sudden, in a very short space of time, the world changed and they went from leaders to obscurity. And of course, the sorts of names that we think of there, we always use the examples of Nokia and BlackBerry, and there are a lot of lessons there. And I'm not suggesting in any way that that's going to happen to London, but I think it's important to remind ourselves that, particularly in this space, the need to constantly monitor the market dynamics and also make sure that we are adapting to change are absolutely key. So look, for me, there are a number of things that we're doing very well right now, which I'll go through very quickly. So, we should be proud of it, but we need to continue to do well, and we need to do even better in each of these. And they're around having an innovation and growth mindset in everything that we do. That applies to SMEs, it applies to large companies, it applies to government, it applies to regulators. Making sure that we have a regulatory framework that truly encourages innovation. We're moving beyond the headline here, really getting to the nitty-gritty of making sure that innovation is encouraged. Again, this is a list of things that I think we're actually very good at, but that we need to continue to be extremely good at. And if we drop the ball in any of them, it would have a massive impact. The third, for me, would be promoting entrepreneurship. Sounds easy, sounds simple, sounds like a bit of a cliche, but actually that culture of entrepreneurship, we have seen here in London and across the UK, the success we've had over the last decades, but that's a short amount of time, and competitors can catch up on that very quickly. So it's important to continue to make sure that entrepreneurship is promoted. Great start on crypto, fantastic announcements in 2022, sort of really showing the world that we mean business in the space, and that we can provide an incredibly encouraging pathway. We need to follow through, so that's fantastic. Claire's mentioned talent. It is key, whether it's skilled packages, the impact of immigration policies, all of that comes together, and we need to continue to make sure that we foster talent and capability. Leadership in AI, we need to talk about AI, of course, and for me, this is moving beyond safety, which is extremely important and fantastic that we've taken a thought leadership role in safety, but there's far more that we can take a thought leadership role in, and really cuts through across all areas of financial services. And then, a reminder that tech and financial services is not just about financial services, it's about a whole bunch of other areas of tech, whether it could be VR, it could be ID management and verification. It's, of course, cybersecurity. There's a much bigger ecosystem across the whole of tech that together allows financial services and financial services technology to thrive and flourish. So those, to me, as I say, are a list of ones that we do very well, but we need to continue to do even better. And then there's a bit of homework, right? We've seen it in the report around digital infrastructure, for example, where actually, we have to be honest with ourselves, and we're not as good as our competitors. And so, if we acknowledge and we realize that the internet speeds that we see are not sufficient, we need to do something about it, and we need to do something about it fast. So overall, Damien, a really good environment, but also a realization that we need to act fast to make sure that we can maintain that position, and that we have the vision over the next decade to really take it to the next level.
Fantastic, really strong platform, but having that vision and then actually delivering on it is going to be key. Claire, coming back to you, the FSSC, you recently launched the People and Technology Report with PwC and EY, I think. And it shows that closing the sector skills gap could boost the economy, and that the figure put on it is £500 million a year, which is pretty impressive stuff. there's a real prize out there, but how do we achieve that?
No, thanks, Damien. Yeah, we did a lot of work over the last year to really dig into some of the skills challenges and quantify them a little bit more clearly. And I think this sort of underpins a lot of our work, that it really has to be around evidence and data led. So one of the key figures, including the one you've just mentioned about the potential boost to the economy if we do close skills gaps, was actually what is the skills gap? We can always look at vacancies, but actually what's the gap of people's proficiency in the roles? As tasks and the industry changes so quickly, are people's abilities to perform at the best level and be as productive as possible in their roles, is that keeping pace? And we found that there's a 16% gap, skills gap. So 16% of people in the industry need significant upskilling. And now that's not going to close. We've got to close that gap, but also keep ahead, as Danny's just really nicely laid out. This thing is not static, it keeps moving. So agreed, we need to come up with a plan and deliver on that plan, and also be honest about where we've got those gaps and really focus in on them, because this doesn't have to be about more and more and more. It's about skilling and targeting those efforts in the right places with some clarity. So the areas that we developed in terms of with EY, with PwC, with our members, but also with 45 senior leaders in the industry that we interviewed. So this has got some real, it's been socialized quite well. The first thing is making sure that skills and talent are integral to strategy, moving away from sort of short-term reactive recruitment-based approaches to more skills planning and reskilling approaches. And we're seeing that change. That is becoming more part of the industry. It needs to go further. I've mentioned about data-led approaches, being really clear on what skills are needed so you can target that. It's not about more training for everyone, it's training in the right place at the right time. Then it's around actually delivering on that skills development. That can be through a number of areas. Is that international talent coming in? Is that about deep reskilling, moving people from parts of the business where those roles won't be required anymore into areas where there's demand, and retaining the expertise people have and just building, augmenting that. This isn't that people's skills are not relevant, they need to be augmented. Because talent is scarce, right? We're all competing. We're competing with other sectors, we're competing internationally. So you building on what we've already got is really important. And finally, it's about collaborating. And I think Danny mentioned that, if we do work together, we can go a bit faster, we can go further, we can get there together, but with some real clarity on what we're trying to achieve. So those are the areas that we recommended for action.
Brilliant. Thanks for laying that out. Very practical. Neylin, sustainable finance, right at the cutting edge of innovation. It's going to be needing the support of very strong skills and training uplift is going to be one kind of key part of that. But we're seeing the commitment across government, 4,000 companies committed to net zero targets. And many sectors are going to need to make significant shifts. How should industry and government work better together with financial services to address the challenge of that transition?
Very good question, Damien. And it's it's important to be quite intentional of answering it. Listen, there are real opportunities to decarbonize the economy today, which we need to do. And we can achieve that by working with, not against, companies in carbon-intensive sectors. These opportunities usually require more capital, not less. And companies in every sector are going to have to chart their transition pathways. And in almost every scenario, this means investment in new areas, i.e. electric vehicle supply chains, hydrogen pipelines, carbon capture and storage facilities. These will not be built without additional investment, both from large corporations that are transitioning, but as well as clean technology companies, some of which that Danny is mentioning, that are paving the way to accelerate the transition. The role of financial services is to facilitate access to capital and finance that can support the transition of the real economy, including those for higher emitting sectors that are not currently green. We are very focused on working with our clients to provide the expertise and capital they need to advance their decarbonization strategies. But finance in support of the transition is, of course, just one component. We can enable and support the real economy's transition, but the ability of companies to successfully transition is going to be dependent on whether they have economically viable opportunities to decarbonize their businesses and whether there are the right conditions in the real economy. And what are these real economy enabling conditions? Just to name a few, and I think we will come back to this theme again and again. First and most importantly is enabling public policy. Visionary and credible domestic and industrial policy framework beyond what has been said today is absolute necessity for us to make this a success. And of course, following from that, we will need clean energy infrastructure. We will need innovation and technological advancements that Danny has very kindly focused on. And of course, we will need evolution of consumer behavior and demand. Supportive public policy is key, including providing further clarity and commitment around sector-specific policies to deliver on those net zero commitments. Private finance and corporates need policy clarity in order to invest in the transition. We're going to need a range of policy interventions across sectors to address barriers that various sectors are facing today to transition. For example, with respect to long-term hydrogen offtake agreements and incentives to retrofit steel plants. And we need businesses to be part of this conversation, on how to address these barriers. Last but not least, effective collaboration between government, regulators, the financial system, and across the economy is going to be incredibly crucial to make this a success.
Fantastic for laying that out, and that core need for policy clarity and then the collaboration to deliver on that. Thank you very much. So staying on the theme of future success, but shifting to a wider canvas, and a really interesting one that comes through the benchmarking report is around stock markets, it's around listings. And indeed, one of the questions that's come through is already on this area. And just to say to those watching, please do keep those questions flowing, because we're now, after this question, or indeed on this question, we're about to get into some of those questions that have come into us. So Danny, I mean, we've all seen the reports, the criticisms that UK stock market in decline. Is it turnaround? Is that true? And what is it that we can be doing in order to strengthen what's going on in terms of the gap with the US? But perhaps it's also just sort of worth clarifying whether really things are as bad as one would sometimes think if you were just taking the media stories.
Thanks, Damien. And I've just read Nigel's question too, so I'll try and incorporate that in part of my answer. This is a tricky one. I am forever an optimist in everything I do, so I'm going to try and inject positivity in this, because I actually think it's very justified. Look, I think first of all we have to accept that the IPO market has been comatose globally for a year. That's the reality. We're not alone. You look at the number of issues in the US, and that has obviously declined massively over the last 12 months. And you look at new issues across Europe, and it's the same story. So I think it's unfair to single London out on that. First of all, I also think just to get some of that part out of the way, I agree with you on the media front. It's a great headline, isn't it, when an absolutely massive company and a number of national treasures say decide that the public market's future for them is not here and it's in the US. It is of course right that everybody knows about that and reads about it. But I do think that there's a much bigger story on this than that. Look, so first of all, let's, a little bit like I started with my previous question, let's start thinking about the progress that we have made in this space over the last couple of years, because I think it's fair to say that government and regulators have listened and have also observed what's been happening in the US on that front. And we've seen a number of regulatory reforms announced. We had the Hill Review, we had the Edinburgh Reform, We've seen work on bureaucratic hurdles. We've seen changes in listing requirements. We've seen an acknowledgement that work has to be done on providing flexibility on listing rules. This is all really good, positive progress, and definitely, again, not thinking about the today, thinking about the next 10, 20 years. It's really important work to be able to make sure that when markets come back, and they will come back, we've all seen multiple cycles throughout our careers, some like me more than others, but the cycles are there, and they're very real. So then I think there are a number of things that we can start doing now to make sure that when the tide turns, we are very well positioned. First of all, I think it's important to actively promote UK markets internationally. Everybody's doing this, and we are competing against not just New York, we're competing against a number of global players. So telling our story internationally is I think extremely important. There's an overall investor education that I think we need to get better at in the UK to make sure that we can increase the number of retail investors, which is an important part of this journey, but making sure that there's a far greater understanding of public markets, which are still in many ways, I think there's a lot of demystifying that needs to be done. There's a tech collaboration with fintech to make sure that all of the advances that we've seen in tech over the last few years, kind of really drill into and sort of start permeating throughout the actual infrastructure. We see it with blockchain and settlement, and so many other examples that need to be carried forward. But I think if there's one fundamental point I would make on all of this, and is a great example, right? That provided a massive headline last year, and it's something that we all read about. But to me, the story here is not about the big players. It's not about the one or two companies that are huge and they decide to go to New York. The story is about the far greater pool of SMEs that will grow over time. Let's remember that growth and innovation mindset that I mentioned earlier, and that become the right candidates to access public markets probably a little bit earlier than we've been used to over the last few years. And there's no bad thing that smaller companies can access those public markets earlier, and make sure that we're providing an environment to nurture them, to help them. They can grow in the public markets, and when they become of the sorts of sizes of the big companies that we've seen leave, they won't, because they will have been supported throughout that journey. They will have been nurtured, as I say, throughout that journey. And what we're doing is we're encouraging a big cohort of companies to progress and thrive in the public market. I think another piece, that if you look at New York, you've got 2 stock exchanges. That's good. You need competition in everything, So I think here you've got, for growth companies, you've got AIM, but you've also got Aquis. Important to make sure that innovation, that competition is really encouraged. But my main point is, let's focus less on the huge big companies that make those headlines when they make that decision, and let's focus more on the very large number of smaller companies that need to be helped to access those public markets, encouraged and supported. If we get this right, this is not about 2023, 2024 or 2025. This is about the next decade, the next couple of decades. And then my final piece on this, just to answer the question, is around rankings. I'm with you. I think rankings can be very dangerous sometimes. We just we come up with a ranking, who's number 1, who's number 2, who's number 3. You have to have them because you're analyzing so much in a benchmark, but they come together and they offer some results. But the key is less about the position in the ranking, is more about understanding why you're in that position and all the various components, which is I think the discussion that we're having today.
Fantastic, Danny. Really eloquent overview, and I think that call to be careful about rankings, because actually it's what underpins them. It's the direction of travel, and I think your point there about the focus on SMEs, which of course we worked on particularly through the Mansion House Compact, and looking to get far more institutional investment into growing tech companies is going to be part of that story over the next 5 to 10 years. So another question that's come in is really interesting one around the impact of London's, I will quote the question, of London's crazy housing market. We're not taking a view on whether London's housing market is crazy or not, but that's the questioner's view. But I think there's something really key here about the impact of housing prices on recruitment and retention of staff in London, but actually, and it may be worth bringing in the whole of the UK, because actually our UK financial and professional services is a UK-wide offering. Claire, is this one that you could take?
Sure. Yeah, and we've not done specific work looking specifically at the link between housing and recruitment and the talent market, but this is something that does come up because people need to live somewhere, they need to commute somewhere broadly. Largely, we will have an office somewhere still, even though we might not be in it as often as we were before the pandemic. And this is something that firms are mindful of very much so, and also the preferences of people to work in a different location, whether that be further in the UK, internationally, and sort of have that agreement to work remotely. We must remember that 2/3 of roles in the industry are based outside of London. The roles in London tend to be more highly skilled and more highly remunerated. This is in financial and professional services, but we can't divorce what we do in London from the services and supply chain and the whole cost of living and the ecosystem in London, hospitality, retail, service industries, etc. So there's certainly an impact, and firms are mindful of that. I think there's a real question for early talent, particularly those at the beginning of their careers, of being able to afford to work in London. Maybe some graduate roles can be well remunerated, but if you're looking at apprenticeships, for example, it's very unlikely you'd get an apprentice to move to London to be able to work and live on an apprentice salary. So it does have an impact. But then I think it's an interesting question more broadly, looking at the opportunities and how the UK as a whole, the financial and professional services sector works across the UK as a whole, because we are seeing firms really amplify and grow their presence across UK's regions and nations. And this was happening before the pandemic, movements towards Birmingham, but we see, real exciting centres developing in Belfast, for example, great work happening there. And this is not, I think traditionally people thought that's just back office functions. It's not. It's really, really high value add functions. And the talent conversation within that is really live. We've just a few weeks ago, a report was published by the Yorkshire and the Humber Financial and Professional Services Skills Commission, long title, but you'll get what it does. And that was a grouping of organisations looking at the skills and talent needs for the sector across the Yorkshire and the Humber. And there's a real attraction point for the industry there, saying we have got a lower cost of living, people can potentially have a higher cost quality of life. I think that's all a bit subjective, but there's a real opportunity there. They then struggle with things like transport infrastructure, which perhaps isn't such an issue in London. So these things all have different rankings, but undoubtedly firms are thinking about London as a location to attract the talent they want, not only from the housing and lifestyle costs, but also from the availability of talent. And what decisions does, for example, top graduates make when they graduate? Do they want to come to London, look at the cost, or do they want to stay somewhere else? And firms are alive to that, and they're moving operations around in response. So it does have an impact.
Claire, thank you very much. One that I suspect we will come back to in future years as well. The next question for Neylin. Neylin, any lessons that we can learn from international peers on the sustainability side? Who do you feel that London, the UK is competing against, and what can we learn from them?
Well, I'll be a little bit biased with my answer because I work for a US bank, but also equally I'm responsible for implementing ESG regulations and disclosure requirements in the EU and in the UK. So I'll try to give a little bit of lessons learned and from peer markets that have taken slightly different approaches to enable sustainable finance and enable capital flows towards the transition. If we look at the US, the Inflation Reduction Act definitely created a very positive momentum, and it is a public policy example in terms of how to support and incentivize green businesses and green jobs across the whole of the economy through tax incentives and other mechanisms. And we have seen quite a lot of activity after the Inflation Reduction Act in terms of business growth, job creation across states in the US that traditionally you would assume will not necessarily be that supportive of this sort of transition of their main economic opportunities. If we look, so the Inflation Reduction Act and what the US has done around it, I think it's an example that is worth analyzing and looking at the benefits and upsides it is providing for the economy, but also job creation. On the other hand, if we look at the European Union, the jury is still out whether the regulatory and supervisory framework and expectations around that in terms of labeling, disclosures, the level of complexity and prescriptiveness across the various green agenda regulation that has been coming out in that region in the last couple of years actually is creating the real enabling conditions to direct capital flows towards sustainable finance and green businesses is still, I think, subject to debate. So I do think, in terms of lessons learned, both peers or both markets provide, clear, I think, examples of level of differences that they have taken in accelerating the transition and growing the green economy, but also what the consequences of these policy interventions and regulatory interventions have been so far, and it's quite clear examples of and we all experience it of what works and what doesn't work that well.
Great, thank you very much. Question coming for Danny and perhaps Claire may want to add something at the end as well. It really feels as though the industry is on the cusp of some very significant changes, whether it's around tech or some of the sort of political and regulatory environments over the next year or two. What do we need to really get right in the short term to take advantage of that longer term cycle?
Well, look, I think in a way we've covered some of those today, but it's important to recap and emphasize their importance. So we've talked about investing in technology and innovation, and I think the danger with a lot of these is that we're good many times at coming up with a headline. It's the key is in execution. So we need to put a lot of work into understanding what that means, how we make sure that startups, research and development, collaboration between industry and academia, that continues to be extremely strong, that all the right resources are allocated to, as I mentioned earlier, the much wider overall kind of cusp of what tech is all about, not just fintech, but AI, thinking about RegTech, cybersecurity, quantum, VR, ID management verification, all of that. So really getting that tech and innovation piece right. What follows from there is, of course, making sure the regulatory environment is able not just to adapt with that change, but is able to foresee that change. So, staying at the forefront and being a key ingredient in that innovation agenda. We've mentioned digital infrastructure. I think that's really important. You can do a really good job on the proposition that you have, but if you don't have the right digital infrastructure to support it, then you've got a problem. And it's I'm not going to say it's an easy fix, but it's very clear that we know what the homework is, and it's making sure that we do something about it. The talent piece, Claire has covered, but I think the talent piece, investing now will mean that we will reap rewards in the future. Educational programs, all sorts of skilled workforce initiatives, thinking about the various fields that maybe we need to do more work in, whether it's data science or particular parts of digital, infrastructure, whatever it might be. I would, of course, cybersecurity is my background, so it would be remiss of me not to say how important that is. I think it's key. It's also important to see that in that report we don't score as well as some of our competitors. So making sure that we invest in it and we prioritize it is really important. We've covered housing and affordability, and Claire's covered that really well. And I also agree that it's very important. I think of the company that I run, and I think about a lot of our younger engineers, and it's something that needs to be looked at and considered. I think there's the wider piece, I think, around the cultural and destination offer that's also highlighted in that report, where I think London over the last couple of years and the initiatives that you and your team, Damien, have run with Destination City have been phenomenal. And it's really important to make sure that there's an environment that attracts people to come into the space. And it's not just London, it's actually the whole of the UK working in unison. So look, in summary, the ingredients are all there. There's a realization of what it is that we need to do. There's masses to take advantage of, but I think my final message would be, this is not a 24-month thing. This is a 10, 20, 30-year thing. And if we get that right, just like London has reinvented itself time and time again. And I go back to my original example of, Nokia and BlackBerry versus, say, a Microsoft and an Apple. That is reinvention, that is seeing the future before it happens and executing and doing something about it. And that, to me, is what this is all about.
Fantastic, Danny. Thanks for drawing that together. Claire, you may want to build on that, but there's also a question that would be great if you can address, which is, have we been able to track whether talent remains in the UK, or we develop the skills and then that's one of our exports?
No, thank you. And I think Danny articulated what I was going to say really well. So thanks. But just on the previous question, though, I agree. The long-term goals remain, and whatever sort of bumps and uncertainty we have over the next 12 or 24 months, those long-term plans need action now. So it's sort of don't wait and see for it all settling. I think one of the quotes that we took from one of the CEO of one of the big banks said to me over the summer was that the uncertainty is the only certainty. So we've just got to get on with it and make sure that we're equipped to deal with whatever comes down the road. So I'd certainly think, focus on the long-term goals, but take action now. On the other question about international talent, there's actually the City of London Corporation are launching their international talent report tomorrow at 1 o'clock. And if you want to hear more of me, I'm on that panel too. But it's a really good report looking at the UK's position in terms of that international talent marketplace. And broadly, London and the UK really still rank well in terms of attracting talent. There's always movement, but I think it depends where we look for that, because we do not have the volume of tech expertise that we are demanding as an industry. And this is why we see a lot of demand and a lot of provision of that tech expertise in places like India, etc. And most countries now do have quite a high level and quite an active plan to build tech talent. The US, Middle East, etc. All these countries have got a big programs in place to build tech talent. And that's probably something where we need to focus a bit more, I would say, in the future, because that pipeline isn't something you can switch on and off immediately. It takes time to build that up. But we are attractive as a global financial centre. I think there's been a shift in the last few years of talent coming in. We're seeing less European talent, more global, non-European talent coming in. But it's something that the report tomorrow has much more detail on.
Fantastic. Thank you for appearing for us twice, Claire, but also making people aware of that. And perhaps we can, subsequent to this, we can share details of that with those who've tuned into this. In a moment, I'm going to ask the panel a final quick fire question. Before that, there was just one question that I wanted to make sure that we covered, where someone congratulated us on the opening our footprint in the US, opening office in New York and in Washington, which is a really exciting next step, in appointing a managing director who is going to be starting in a week's time. Ed Price, who many of you may have come across as he has worked over in New York for quite a while now. And we'll be delighted to welcome him. In terms of the plans for the next phase, I'm looking forward to working those up with Ed. We don't want to sort of jump ahead of ourselves, but we're certainly going to be building on what we've done already. And I think there is such opportunity there. We've seen in the last sort of 5-6 years just the direction of travel in terms of mutual trade on financial and professional services is quite extraordinary, but the sense is that the opportunity there is huge, and we want to make sure that that corridor, we are on the political and regulatory level, we're making sure that all of the interchanges, the learnings are going on, that the regulatory side, we're particularly looking at some of those future focused areas where if we can make sure that we're converging rather than diverging, actually the opportunities for trade going in both directions, but hopefully quite a lot of it going from this side to that side, are going to be major. And also some of the key industries that we'd want to either make sure that we're in really strong connection with JP Morgan and other US banks very strongly amongst those. But there are key areas like insurance or asset management where we have a sense that there's a lot more to be done. So please watch this space. We'd love to work with right across the industry on this area. It's absolutely key. So last question to all of our panel. This is a really rich report, and for those watching, please do take the time to have a look through. There is just so much there. It's a real goldmine. What would be your key insight or takeaway from the report and your reflections on the report? Who'd like to go first?
I
Thank you.
may. Listen, it's not particular reflections, but maybe just to tie into everything that we've discussed so far in the panel and what came across to me in the report is, to Danny's point, we have the ingredients. The most important thing is to be nimble, adaptable, and innovative. And that also needs to be underpinned by real conviction. That is divorced from market cycles, political cycles. To Danny's point, this is 10, 20, 30-year conviction about the long-term opportunity that is going to enable the growth, sustainable growth in this country. So to me, this is kind of the overwhelming sentiments I took away from the report.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Neylin. Danny, do you want to go next?
Sure. Look, I think I'll double down on some of those points and say that I think we have the opportunity to sign up to a visionary commitment that shapes the financial landscape across the UK for the next few decades. It's an incredible opportunity to have. It's up to us now to make the most of it.
Thank you very much, Danny. Claire.
Thank you. I think I just think the breadth of indicators in here is a really good barometer of where we are. But I think although it's incredibly important to sort of look across all of these, actually making London, the UK, the best financial centre goes beyond some indicators. So it isn't just about we've got to beat another financial centre, we want to be beyond. And so I think exactly that ambitious vision, keeping true to that, and the indicators will sort of prove our point that we've got to stay the course and invest and not be complacent about what the challenge is.
Brilliant, thank you. That brings us to a fantastic close. Can I say huge thanks to our fantastic panel, to Claire, to Danny, and to Mutlu. Can I say great thanks to Alistair, who has put this report together, and to all of those within the City of London team who've supported that. I think having done these reports now for 4 years, one of the things that really emerges is the fact that things are not stuck in stone. And I think our panelists have already said that there are real opportunities to move the dial, to achieve things, that we need to have that nimbleness and adaptability. We need to have that determination long-term and the collaboration that can really make it work. So looking forward to working with many of you online, and a big thanks again to the panel. Have a great rest of the day. Many thanks indeed.
Thank you. Goodbye.